Welcome to RETRIEVAL session on animism, shamanic journey, and therapeutic shamanism with Paul Francis.
Hi Kaya, good to see you again.
Today we're gonna talk about soul loss, why it happens, what are the symptoms, and how can we get lost soul parts back. So maybe let's just start with the basics. What is soul loss?
Soul loss is absolutely, completely central to shamanism, understanding soul loss and what to do about it. Shamans understand that part of us can leave our body. The thing is, it's meant to come back as well. The idea of part of us leaving our body might sound odd, but I mean, actually, most of us do it every night when we go to sleep, in dreams, when we're no longer in our body, we're in another realm. We can do it in daydreams if we imagine we're somewhere else. And you can obviously do it in a shamanic journey, and that's what a shamanic journey is learning how to leave your body temporarily, go do a journey in the shamanic realms and come back. And as a psychotherapist, particularly a body-centered psychotherapist, I mean, one of the things I really realised over the years is most people in this culture are barely in their bodies in the first place. If you ask people, most people where they think they are, they kind of point here. And then if you ask people, how far down do you think you go? Not how far down can you go, but how far down are you? Most people, it's about, here or here or something. Most people just aren't in their body. The connection between our bodies and the bit we think of as I is flexible. So soul loss is where part of us leaves our body and doesn't come back again. That becomes a real problem.
You're talking about our inner landscape as there were multiple parts of us. Can you elaborate on that?
Obviously, if all of us left our body, we died. That's part of us to keep ourselves alive. When shamans talk about soul loss, they're also meaning parts have left, but parts obviously have stayed and kind of soldiered on, kind of carried on. Shamanism very much understands that we are a multitude of different parts. We have, if you like, our own inner tribe of different parts of us. Understanding things in terms of parts has become quite a big thing in the psychotherapy world. The trendy one at the moment is internal family system, but there's other models are available in psychotherapy. The idea is we are made up of parts, essentially.
And what are the signs you're suffering from soul loss that people can maybe recognize in themselves?
The symptoms of soul loss can be many and varied. It's actually just a feeling like you're somehow not complete, like there is something missing. This feeling like you're not all quite there. It can be just a feeling of flatness, just like you're kind of going through the motions, like there's a lack of real joy. There's a sort of apathy, indifference, like a spark is missing in you, really. You can feel a sense of just being disconnected from life. It's kind of a bit dreamlike, or you just kind of going through it in a bit of a haze. Depression, anything from mild to moderate to severe, just feeling lost and aimless in life, procrastination, lack of motivation, finding it hard to sustain effort or focus, loss of confidence, self-belief, having a strong inner critic who puts you down a lot. Could be missing memories, where have those parts have you gone that experience those things? And then because soul loss sort of creates holes in us, we try to fill these in other ways. So addictions, compulsive behaviours, thought patterns, basically just trying to fill that emptiness with something else. Addictions to drugs, alcohol, but, even just to watching TV too much, or clothes, or handbags, or other people. It can be a feeling of never having recovered from a past event. That's a very common thing. Maybe even part of you just feels stuck back in there, or gets traumatized easily. Inability to move on and leave things behind when they should be left behind. Finding it hard to invest in the future. Feelings that you don't quite understand that just come out of nowhere. Feelings of anger or grief. One of the biggest signs, though, of soul loss, and this might sound odd, but it's just people when they hear about it, part of them just knows that's what's wrong with them. So we're feeling like, oh yes, this is me. This is what I need as well. Really, if you look at the symptoms of soul loss, though, they pretty much read like a description of modern day culture. We live in an absolute epidemic of soul loss in this culture.
Gosh, that's a really long list. I've been ticking quite some boxes myself. So, what causes soul loss?
I mean, it was something that happened to our hunter-gatherer ancestors. So it can be caused by trauma, essentially, accidents, serious illnesses, any kind of traumatic events, death of a loved one or something. Any kind of shock like that can cause soul loss. Now, in hunter-gatherer sort of animist shamanic times, that would have been recognised and it would have been dealt with very quickly, because from a shamanic point of view, soul loss is dangerous, it's unhealthy. So a hunter-gatherer ancestors definitely would have suffered soul loss and it would have been dealt with quickly. These days, I mean, as well as it soul loss being caused by traumas and accidents and things, there's all sorts of other things can cause soul loss as well. An abusive childhood, whether that's actual, emotional, sexual abuse, physical abuse, but also just being neglected as well. Suffering prolonged anxiety and fear in childhood. Shame, we send part of us away because we feel so ashamed of it. Guilt, prolonged disease, prolonged pain can definitely cause soul loss. We can give our soul over to somebody else. We kind of mistake this as sort of twin flames or soulmates and things. If we give part of ourselves away unhealthily in a relationship, if that person betrays us or dies or leaves us in some way, that part goes off with them. We can suffer soul loss because we hand over our power and let ourselves get taken over by religious beliefs, by political beliefs, by a dominating person, or by handing our power over to substances or, to drugs and so on. All sorts of things. The main cause of soul loss in modern day culture, though, is that we send part of ourselves away. That might sound sort of shocking, like, or bonkers. Why would we send part of ourselves away? We do it to fit in. With our hunter-gatherer ancestors, of course, you had to fit in, but those cultures were really based around trying to help people's souls blossom. Modern day culture doesn't want that for most people. It's the last thing it wants. It wants you to consume things or to, be a well-behaved citizen and to sit down and shut up most of the time of things. So in order to survive dysfunctional families, dysfunctional school systems, dysfunctional workplaces, we send part of ourselves away, or lots of parts of ourselves away. This is what domestication is. We kind of think as human beings that we're very clever in terms of all the other animals and species of plants and things that we've domesticated. There's nothing on the planet we've domesticated more than ourselves. We've diminished ourselves. And part of doing that is soul loss. We send so much of ourselves away.
And how does soul loss happen?
It can happen through a trauma. So it can be quite a sudden thing. The part of us can just be shocked out of our body. Any severe shock can do that. And often with that, people will either just blank that thing out completely, or more often is that part somehow sort of stays caught up in that past event. So with things like post-traumatic stress disorder, very often part of the person is relaying that experience over and over again. From a shamanic point of view, it's because literally part of them is still there. They're not here in the present anymore. They're still stuck in that past event and in that past place. So it can happen through sudden shocks and traumas. It could also just happen more gradually, really. So part of us just kind of gives up or just decides there isn't any place for me. I mean, if you were constantly told as a child, say, to not cry or to not be too loud or to not be this or to don't do that or something, I mean, in the end, what choice have you got other than to send that part of you away? That's very common. We send parts of us away in childhood just because we get the message that there isn't any place for those parts of us, that they're not welcome, or even that there's something wrong with those parts, that there's something to be ashamed of. So it can be a gradual thing. It could also happen through, like I was saying, giving our power away to something, to another person who kind of takes us over. I mean, that might be good intention things, kind of, because a lot of people mistake that for being in love. But healthy love is I'm holding myself and you're holding yourself, and we're choosing to walk together, sort of thing. And sometimes it could be not a person, but just something else that takes us over, whether that's alcohol or drugs or political or religious ideology or something. But basically, something can take us over to the point where we actually get squeezed out, and there's little of us kind of left, really.
Where does this lost part of the soul go?
I'm a psychotherapist as well, and I've put a lot of thought into different ways psychotherapy and shamanism look at this. In psychotherapy, a sort of common understanding is dissociation, that due to shock or trauma or negative messages about parts of us, we kind of dissociate, we kind of disembody with it, or push that part of us to one side or something. So in psychotherapy, a lot of psychotherapists will say that what happens if people sort of work for a decent amount of time and work at depth is they start to reclaim parts of them. Yeah. Parts that they might have pushed away in childhood or something. They start to kind of reclaim and reintegrate those parts. And that's absolutely true. And so in some ways you can see that as a sort of modern day version of soul retrieval. However, shamans are clear that there's a difference really between just dissociation, where the part is just sort of pushed to the side, but essentially they're still here, they're still in the room, and proper soul loss. Because in full-blown soul loss, part is no longer here. It's no longer in the room. With psychotherapy, you would try to look out for lost parts or parts that have been pushed aside or marginalised. As the therapist already spotted them, you'd invite them into the conversation and try to talk to them and get a dialogue going and so on and so on. In terms of actual full-blown soul loss, they're not in the room at all. They've left. Where they go, very often they're still stuck in what in shamanism we call the middle world, this we're familiar with, but may be back in time. It may be part of you is still cowering under that kitchen table or hiding behind the sofa because you're terrified. Sometimes parts actually go to the shamanic upper worlds and the lower worlds. That's a better place for them to be. Those are places of healing. So they can be there being looked after. But basically they can be anywhere. But they're not necessarily still in the room. And that's where psychotherapy kind of ends. Shamanism leads to people.
Soul loss is like an epidemic in modern world. Is there a way to reclaim those lost parts? Is there a light at the end of the tunnel for us?
Absolutely, always. And shamanism holds that light. It's more than a candle, it's a great beacon of light. Because shamanism not only really understands soul loss, it absolutely understands what is called soul retrieval as well, which is how to get soul parts out. Usually it's the shaman leaving their body, travelling the realms, finding the lost soul part, persuading it to come back, because it might be terrified to come back or reluctant, doing the healing it needs, because you don't want to put a traumatised part back into somebody. When all that's done, bringing the part back to the person, and then the next most important thing is the process of integrating that part back. So it's the finding the part, persuading it to come back, the healing of it, then the integration that needs to happen. Psychotherapy, like I said, can come close, but it only can go so far. Shamanism is the thing that does soul retrieval.
And is the soul retrieval an event or is it a process?
The first thing to understand is that a lot of people think they might only have lost one or two parts or something. And some people think they haven't lost any, but like I said, I've never met anybody who's riddled with soul loss in this culture. It's hard to sort of quantify because it depends how you divide them up. But, you know, we could say most people have lost probably hundreds of different parts of themselves, maybe even thousands. Some of those are quite small and insignificant. There's techniques where you can gather quite a lot of those up in one go. Others are huge. So how long it's going to take depends on how difficult and big a deal it is, essentially. The actual process itself can look weirdly quick. Theoretically, you can do a soul retrieval in a few minutes, you know, certainly within a sort of 10, 20, 30 minute short journey. Whether that's going to be enough for a really complicated part, that's a whole different matter. And like I say, there's bringing the part back, then there's getting the part to stay as well and integrating it. How long that takes, that's how long's a piece of string, really. And again, that depends on the person, depends on their level of self-awareness. So the answer is it varies a lot.
And you mentioned that soul retrieval nowadays is not necessarily a straightforward process. Can you elaborate more on that?
Hunter-gatherer cultures were not perfect. I'm not putting them on a pedestal. And by any sane measure of a culture in terms of not only sort of ecological sustainability, which is a big deal, given what we're doing with our culture, but also in terms of mental and emotional health. The animist hunter-gatherer cultures were by any sane measure the most successful cultures we've ever produced in terms of mental, emotional, spiritual. We live in an absolute catastrophe of a mental health crisis these days. I mean, the levels of anxiety and depression that we suffer from, we kind of think are normal, but they're really, really not at all. The reason for this is because of what we were saying earlier about domestication, essentially. To fit in this culture, we have to send so much ourselves away. And that is not what hunter-gatherers have to do. The opposite, actually, their cultures were designed to help people really, their souls really blossom, essentially. And that's not what our culture is about. So we send parts of ourselves away. And us sending part of ourselves away is the commonest cause of soul loss in this culture. When people used to come to one work, people would normally have read about soul retrieval, think, oh, absolutely, that's what I need. And they'd want the soul retrieval. So I'd spend a bit of time talking before doing the journey, and basically what I was looking out for was, do they really want it back? Okay. Now that might sound daft, because why wouldn't we want to sell it back? Because we're made of parts of self. Part of us, of course, we want that soul back. You know, we want to feel happier and all those things. But remember, part of you, different parts of you, sent that part away. Okay? And that part is not going to be at all happy. That part, solution. So if I say to people, you know, on a scale of 1 to 100, you know, how absolutely sure that you want this soul part back? And they kind of go, yeah, kind of 80%, 90%. It's not going to happen. I can go and find the part and bring it back. It won't stay because the parts that sent it away will simply send it away again. Or the part that's brought back will know that there's parts don't like it, or the parts are hostile to it, and so it'll leave again. So these days, it's not as simple as it was once in hunter-gatherers' times. When a hunter-gatherer suffered soul loss, there was no part of them didn't want that part. So the shaman could go, get the soul part, bring it back, to blow it into the person, you know, hey presto, everything's fine. what I saw over and over and again was I'd do a soul retrieval, and this is early on in my practice. I'd do a soul retrieval, I'd see other people who'd had soul retrievals, and it would stick for a few days, a few weeks, a month or so, and then it just wear off again. These days, it's not enough to just bring the plant back. You have to actually negotiate with the parts that sent it away. Get them on board. Just give you a simple example. Say what you sent away in your childhood was being assertive. You have to say no. You have to hold clear boundaries. Okay? And your survival strategy in childhood then was to be a pleaser. Now you've got to a point in your life where you realise that's costing you here. So you go to a shamanic practitioner and say, I want my assertiveness back. What do you think your partner's going to feel about that? Or your boss at work? Or your mother? Or your father? Your friends? Yeah? Okay, there can be a lot of investment in not having a part of us can have investment in it. So it's not that clear cut these days. So there has to be a negotiation, getting all the parts of us on board. Even if it's just a trial period, sometimes works. What if they just come back for a few weeks? We can see how it goes. Sort of thing.
And that's where therapy can help?
Yeah, absolutely. If not an actual therapist, then a shamanic practitioner who has those kind of skills, who can actually do that level of negotiating and is aware of parts of soul.
How can one do a soul retrieval? Is this something we can do for ourselves, or we need someone more experienced to do that for us?
Well, it's not either or. It can be a bit of both, really. Obviously, to do a soul retrieval, you need to know how to leave your body. You need to know how to travel in different realms. You need to know what you're doing in those realms, and you need to know how to find your soul paths, and so on. So you need some basic shamanic experience and abilities. That isn't that hard to learn for most people. There's a certain amount of knowledge needed to do a basic shamanic journey, which is the process of leaving the body and traveling the shamanic realms. And then the next thing you need to know is how to find a reliable, true, proper shamanic guide who can lead the journeys. And then essentially your guide is doing your soul retrieval for you. They know where to go, they know what to do, they know what healing is needed, and so on. So there's a certain amount you need to learn. Once you've got that, it's actually your guide so you do it. And so it becomes much easier. You can do a lot fairly quickly. There's other things though. I mean, particularly if it's a really traumatic event, it might be too traumatizing for you to go back into that event or to focus on it too much even, in which case you might need the help of a shamanic practitioner to do that for you. So there's a lot you can do for yourself. And there's times where you need somebody else as well. It's like with health, there's a lot you can do for yourself, and sometimes you need help. Yeah.
Beyond soul retrieval, is there anything we can do to stop further soul loss and support the process of soul retrieval?
Not living in this culture would be a good start. But most of us do have to live in this culture to varying degrees. What can you do? The biggest thing is to start gathering the parts back as much as you can. The wholer you are, the stronger you are. So soul retrieval can become a sort of like a snowball effect. It can gather momentum. The more welcoming you are of other parts back, and you realise it's okay having them back and it's better having them back. So other parts will start to return, sometimes spontaneously, or look back much more readily when you journey, or they just pop up in journeys, spontaneously and so on. So the more you work on yourself and become whole, the more self-accepting you become of all these parts. We are in a tribe of different parts of self. Most people, it's like a very dysfunctional tribe. It's like a terrible playground, bullies and frightened kids and all that stuff. The point is to start to actually turn it into a harmonious tribe. And that means all parts are welcome, all parts have a voice. all parts need to find their place and so on. So that's the main thing. The other thing is soul loss is very bound up with one of the other key understandings of why we get in shamanism, which is power loss. Soul loss is when we become disconnected from parts of ourselves. Power loss is where we become disconnected from the other side, particularly from nature. When we disconnect from nature and from the other than human, our other than human kin, we weaken ourselves. It's like it's unplugging ourselves from a much bigger power source, essentially. We just become weak. And of course, in this culture, most people live lives that are incredibly disconnected from nature. Most people don't even realise the extent to which that's because, they might think, oh, well, I've got a garden, or, go for walks or something. It's like most of nature's been destroyed, or trashed. Where people are walking, they're not connecting to nature, really. They're on their phones, or they're talking to whoever they're walking with. So he did this, and then I did that, stuff, or they're shouting at their dog or something. They're not actually connecting to nature. So the big thing is to address power loss, which is to learn how to actually properly connect to nature again. And that's, again, learnable skills. You can learn how to do this. It's one of the key things about regaining that natural animist shamanic way of being.
You are a shamanic practitioner and a teacher of therapeutic shamanism. What would you suggest to a person that wants to go down this path, that wants to reconnect with nature and wants to learn to do soul retrieval for themselves?
Well, if you want to learn how to do soul retrieval, you have to learn how to do shamanic journeys. For most people, that's not that difficult if you are shown how to do it in a clear way. So it's learning how to do shamanic journeys, which is basically to learn how to, at will, and in a controlled way, to leave your body and travel the shamanic realms. The next step then is to find a reliable shamanic teacher. The way we approach this is the first thing you start with is to find what's called a power animal. It's an animal because it's close enough to human for you to be able to fall in love with it and really have a close bond with it, but it takes you also out of the modern day human middle world. It starts to connect you back to the other human again. That's not that difficult to learn. We actually teach it on a course, our first steps course. And my first book is literally a step-to-step guide with lots of practical exercises to teach yourself the basics of shamanic journey. It's stuff that should be natural to us. Lots of people these days think it's, some like special gift that only certain special people have. It's like being a musician or something. Yes, some people can be really gifted at it, but lots of people learn, to some extent to do something like used to be shot musical singing.
It was a really profound exploration of soul loss. And I also feel it's like this big topic that can maybe feel like a Pandora box when you start to open it. So maybe just last few words of encouragement to someone that feels like they might have symptoms but are not sure if they're ready to dive in.
What I would say was you absolutely can get better. You absolutely can cure soul loss. Shamanism absolutely knows how to do this. Really, if you are willing, you just need to either learn how to do it and or find, get help for somebody who can do it, and it can be done. Don't feel overwhelmed by it. Don't feel despondent about it. It's the water we swim in this culture. It's what we're used to. And it doesn't have to be like this, and it is absolutely flexible. I mean, I've taught thousands of people this now, and you absolutely can do this. What I see people do is try all sorts of other things. Sometimes people spend years of their life doing it. If you've got actual soul loss, you need soul retrieval.
Thank you, Paul, for your time and for sharing all your knowledge. And I really hope we can talk sometime soon.
So do I.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you, Kaya. I appreciate it.